Hello. Well, it's good to be back again, right? It's usually fun when we get on sessions like this and we do cool fun stuffs. Well, one of the things we'll be looking at today will be working with the Amazon Elastic Container Service, or the ECS, which is obviously like what you find when you're using the EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service. But again, this is Amazon kind of owned stuff, while the EKS can actually have the flexibility integrating with other products or the service providers. Okay, great. So enough with that initial talk. Let's do a bit of introduction, then we'll look at maybe the overview of today's session. Then we'll get hands-on dirty. Introduction: Amazon ECS. I'll be calling it the ECS just for short. It's a highly scalable, fast container management. It's actually a container management service that makes it easy to run, stop, and manage Docker container on a cluster. Usually, in Amazon EC2 instances, this is where you find the difference between the EKS and this. Now, you will require knowledge of Docker container, at least at the basic level. Also, you require to know what the TCP ports are, then the HTTP proxies, and as well as load balancers, because we'll be using all this in today's session. Okay, so the service load balancer is something which I think I will touch on. But first, let's talk about some of the components of the ECS. Maybe that would be fun to talk about. Now, the Amazon ECS contains several components, some of which we will touch on include the container instance. Now, the container instance is actually an Amazon EC2 instance that is running the Amazon ECS agent and has been registered into a cluster. So the container instance is actually an EC2 instance registered into a cluster. Now, a cluster is basically a logical grouping, just like the English word cluster. You have logical grouping of containers instances on which you can place task. So the next question will be, what is a task and what is a task definition? Whilst a task is a single instantiation of a task definition, let's look at the task definition. It's a description of the application that contains one or more container definitions. So you have the clear description for the definition, and the task is just a single instantiation or instantiation. You start in a single phase of that definition. Now, the scheduler is another important thing to note. The scheduler is actually a method used for placing tasks in on container instances. So the scheduler places different tasks on different container instances for them to be able to start or execute. Now, the next thing will be the Amazon Ecs service. Now, this actually allows to run and maintain a specified number of instances for a task definition simultaneously. So you want to have that flexibility to run simultaneous tasks. The ECS service handles that. Okay, now with all that knowledge, what does it look like to schedule or scheduling Amazon ECS task? So the Amazon ECS task is actually a shared state optimistic concurrent system that provides flexible scheduling. So we have the flexibility in scheduling for task and containers. Now, the ECS scheduler leverage clusters. So we'll look at cluster. We'll talk about cluster later. A logical grouping, state information provided by Amazon ECS API. So again, we're looking at the API, which actually makes the appropriate placement description, okay, or decision as well. Then the next thing which we'll look at will be the service definition parameter. Excuse me, a service definition parameter actually defines which task definition to use with your service. Now, what that means is basically how many instantiation of that task will be run, and which load balancer, if there are any, actually associated to that task. So it's clearly descriptive, and definitive. Then the next thing will be the service load balancer, which you have on my screen. So the service load, the service load balancer actually can it's kind of like an optionally, it can be configured optionally to use the ELB, for instance. Look at what we have there. We have these users right outside. This is the AWS infrastructure. So we have ELBs, and they can connect to these different instances within the EC2 cluster. So we can see the cluster. We've got this container instance 3, instance 2, instance 1. Now look right here. The ELB actually have this clear description of service services, load balancer port, the container port. So which means this ELB, for instance, is not restrictive, but can also be restrictive to only this service 1. And this can be restricted to service 2. Then we have load balancer on port 80. If you watch, all load balancers are port 80, but the container instances, they are different container instances. So we can see that clarity right there. So users can connect to different instances via the ELB. So this is what it looks like. Now, before we really get hands-on into the nitty-gritty of maybe registering a task definition and looking at some other concepts, just a high-level overview. We will create ECS task definition. We'll populate the ECS cluster. We'll deploy an application to the ECS. Then we will deploy the application updates by changing task definition. Then also we will scale up the application. These are the things we'll be covering today. So the first thing we'll do will be quickly, let's get into the first part of creating an ECS task definition. All right, join me as we get hands-on practical. Okay, so our first task will be to register a task definition with the Amazon ECS image. So right here we have the ECS console. I'm going to click on task definition because we're actually creating a new one. So we'll create a new task definition and we'll set up a few things. For specific, we can use it at Fargate or EC2 or external. We'll be sticking with EC2 for this recording. Then we'll click on next. Then the configuration, we will be using a JSON definition, which I have right here for the specific stuff we want to do. So we're going to copy that and paste that in now. You may be wondering why this option. Well, it's pretty easy for me to define everything within the JSON. As you would see when I walk you through this quickly, the family is the app demo. Container definition defines the container. Then we have the volume mapping, then the hosts and the container ports mapping. Then we have a few for this no command, the environment essential entry point. Then we go all the way down to defining the container path there, the memory definition, the CPU utilization, and the image from the Docker hub. Then also for the second one, you will also see we're executing a command right here, which is actually a basic okay, I'm gonna remove this double S. It's a basic Elastic Container Service sample app. Then set up a few other variables right there, like the head and the header 1, then also a bit of dates and the timestamp happening over there, then sleep. Okay, the environment definition, the entry point is an SH. It's another bash. Okay, then also for the second one we define the resources, and that's it. So what we're going to do to bring that thing in is to go all the way to the bottom. We'll see configure via JSON. We have this option here. We'll delete the default, then I'll copy this one and go paste it right over there. Okay, not sure why. Okay, I'm just gonna drag from the bottom all the way to the top. There it goes again with this crappy stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna copy all this stuff and paste it right here. Okay, so if I once I click save this, it will fill up or it will populate every bit of details. If I go back up, you will see from the JSON it's extracted everything that we need and clearly defined the most important thing. We can see both containers here clearly defined. Then we can also see the resources assigned based on the JSON definition. One of them is 300, the other is 200. One of them is HTTPD 2.4, the other one is BusyBox. Okay, all that definition is done. But again, we still need to set up a few things just so we're able to match what we have. So what we'll do is at this point, for the role, no role, the network mode, currently we are not setting anything at this moment. So I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and create this. Then the next thing which I'm going to do is which is where we'll be setting stuff. We'll go back to cluster and be doing a bit of clustering. Or first, I think we should do service, which also falls on that cluster. So I'm going to go back to cluster. So on that cluster, I can see there is a cluster already created here. We'll be leveraging this cluster. If I click on that cluster, we will, on that services, currently there are no services, right? So we want to create a new service. So for the service we're creating, we'll set the launch type to EC2. again, we have these options. Then it populates based on what we have in the JSON template. Now the service name, we will have to fill in that. So we'll call this my service, maybe the first one, my first service. Then the number of tasks, I will be setting one task for this. So the next thing we'll do is we can probably review the other things like the deployment circuit breaker. Currently they are non-set, but we can set maybe enable rollback in case there is a failure, rolls back. The maximum percentage is 200, maximum health percent is 100. Then the rolling updates setup, the tax placements, we're using the AZ balance spread. We have other options here. Then I will just not tag this, then I'll click on next. Now the next thing we'll be doing will be the load balancing section. So right here we can see the health checks grace period as specified. You want to be familiar with this actually, but currently we need to put up a load balancer, right? So we will be selecting a load balancer type. For this, we have the option of application load balancer, which sits for the OSI layer 7, right? But for the TCP IP layer 4. We also have the network load balancer, which actually sits at the network layer. Then we have the classic load balancer. I think I've used this for a couple of my videos, the classic load balancer, but we'll be using the network load balancer for this particular recording. Now we'll be specifying production listener and also target group name clearly. So if you see here the IAM role, it's going to create the Ecs Service role. Now we also want to review this role to be sure that the right permission, or just the right permission required, is what is associated to that role. The load balancer name, we can leave it as my load balancer, okay, which is what we're selecting there. Then the container to load the balance, again, this can be either, which is this one we have in the simple app, not on the other one. We defined it too clearly if you look right here. So we're going for the simple app. Now we can add a load balancer if we don't find. We can do that here, or we can apply a mesh, but quickly we'll review this and maybe add a load balancer. Let's see if we can add one. We'll be doing the production listener ports, excuse me, I will leave that on port 80. Then the target group name, we'll set that to this, my target group, which we have right there. Okay, I think everything looks good. If I go to the bottom, we're seeing it's TCP instance type. Then the health check is TCP as well. Currently, we're not doing any app mesh and no service directory, so we're just going to click next on this. Now for auto scaling, which is also very important, well, it's optional, but again, I deemed it as important because again, you want to have something that can automatically help you adjust service desired count based on the request using maybe a CloudWatch metric, which is very necessary actually to help you have that visibility and clarity into what you're doing. So for this, we do not adjust the service desired count. We can also configure auto scaling to adjust the service desired count. So I'm just going to click next on this. Then we will review everything which you've set up to be sure it matches what we want. Then we can go ahead and maybe create this. If it doesn't match, it's recommended that you actually review again. So I'm going to click create. Then once this is ready, I'll be able to view the services. Wait for that to populate, then we'll come back to you guys. So it's up and running, so we can see the IAM policy has been attached. Then the service has been created. We can view the services. I'm going to click view the services. So now we'll be able to see a bit of task definition. Current state is running for my app demo, or your app demo, which is actually the Docker container right there. So this all looks good. We can quickly, if we want to run an update, we can do an update. We can view details. We can view events. This is details. The container port is 80. We can view events. It's a bit slow. We can view events. I'm not sure there will be any major events at the moment except for the creation event and all the stuff. Then auto scaling group, which we also had specifically not set. So currently no auto scaling resource configured for this service. Okay, the metric also, we can view the metric if it's any been generated here for the CPU utilization and for the memory utilization. Currently nothing. So go back to my task. Now at this point, we've been able to get the cluster up and the service running. So the next thing we to do will be to maybe do a bit of reviewing, then understand what is happening, then maybe at some point go look at the target groups and see what we can do with that. Okay, so let's go view this app and see what it looks like. So under details, you can see there's a target group. I'm clicking on target group and it launches the EC2 dashboard console. So right here, we can see details about the targets. We can also see the registered target, which is this one here. The health state is healthy. There's no unhealthy flag yet. The VPC, then the load balancer. Clicking on the load balancer, which is associated with this, pops up. This still under the EC2 console. We can see the definition which we gave my load balancer, and then we can see every bit of details right here as well. So to be able to access this, we can, under the description, we'll find the DNS name and we'll copy that. If I take this to my browser and paste this, it should be able to take me to the application. So let's see if that configuration worked out fine, and obviously it did. Elastic Container Sample Service App, just to show you where that is within the code definition. You can see that right here, Elastic Container Sample App, the title and every bit of details, the background color, the time stamp which is specified as well, then every bit of it. Okay, so we're done with this first part. Now the second part of this recording will be to deploy a new service version to the service and see how that works. Then we're also going to update a running service and see how that's going to actually reflect on timing and also the availability of the service. Okay, so let's first start with deploying a new application version to the service and see how that works. So we're going to go back to ECS console, then we'll be using a task. So if I go back to my ECS console, okay, that's this one here. So we can see there's a task definition right here. So I'm going to click task definition. Remember, what we want to do now is to deploy a new application version to the service. So we'll identify our app, which is this right here, and is active. Excuse me. Okay, so we'll click on this, then we can create a new version, remember. So we also have other options here, create service, update service, but we're creating a new version of this. So let's see how that works. So we'll go over again to the base and be using a JSON template, which I will just show you what it looks like and compare both of them. Okay, so this is what the new version looks like. This is the old version. Okay, just some slight difference with the mapping and the definition. So we're going to grab this and paste this right here, replacing what we have here. So I'm going to remove this. My bad. Okay, and paste the new version in there. Okay, so we have a new version for us. We will save this. Now, remember, the whole fact is we're trying to see how fast we can probably make changes off the fly without actually any hassle. So if I scroll up to see the difference, so right here, looking, we still have 200, 300, 2.4 busy bucks, but 1010, yeah, and everything looks pretty much okay at this point. Now we're going to rapidly see how we can just get this thing done with and go to the cluster and create a service and see how all that stuff will be working out pretty fast without any hassle. So you can quickly or rapidly update your stuff without any challenge. Again, I'm going to be doing this. I'll just go to the bottom and click on create. So we'll wait for this to finish. Then once this is done, we will move on to the next part of this challenge, which will be to now doing a bit of on the cluster. If I go right over to the cluster, excuse me, we should have our cluster here. I'm going to click on that cluster which we're working with. Then under services, we will see currently what we have. Now at this point, we want to update the service, right? So we're going to click on this service because we're not creating a new one. So we're going to be updating the service. I'm going to update the service. So wait for this to populate. Currently the version is 2. Okay, ACS, check up, everything looks okay. Number of tasks still 1. I'm going to just go to the bottom and click next on this. Then again, I'm going to review this. The updates definition is already done in our template. So we're going to review this, click next on this. then we will just finalize this stuff and update it. Okay, so let's update this, and then once that update is clicked and it's running, we will be checking the event tab. Let's see how that will be reflected. Okay, so excuse me, I'll have to go back to viewing my service, then under the events, let's go check. Initially we had 2 events, so let's see what we have at the moment. So we can see 2 other events have been generated for the recent updates. Now this may take a while for some case being on the network, but in my case it was pretty fast. I'm just going to refresh that, verify that yes, the service 1 registered, target 1, target my group, then also the service has just started the task, then this is the new task definition number. Okay, so at this point we've been able to do all this. Now once we are good to go, we can check the deployment. Let's see what it looks like at the moment. So currently we can see the placement task. We can also see the service deployment option, the minimum health check, and also all that. We can create a pipeline, we can view pipelines, but currently we have this deployment right there, which is the one we've just created. We can see the rollout status is completed. Okay, give me a second. So a quick mental check will be to ensure that the desired count and the running count are the same. If they're not the same, you may probably will have to go back and review what you've done. Most likely that stuff won't work. So to be able to see how that updates work, I'm going to go back to my app and refresh this. Currently we have Elastic Container Service simple app. Let me refresh this. This still haven't been able to populate yet. We'll maybe wait a while and see how this stuff works. Okay, so as you can see, our app is up and running. Now the last part of this recording won't be showing a demo for it. Basically is the update, so we can also update a running service. Now for instance, why would you want to do this? Maybe you want to change the number of task. Initially we specified 1. Remember, we specified 1. We can, let's say we want to change that from 1 to 2, or from 2 to 3, or we want to set up like a scale up or scale down kind of like configuration based on availability. Now we can do this all in the ECS cluster, which we saw ourselves using at some point, which means we'll be doing all that definition right in the ECS cluster. Now we can just do that by clicking on update. Again, under the update tab, we can specify the number of tasks, which initially was 1, change that to 2. Then we can already go ahead and update, because we're just changing 1 task to 2. Let's say we want to do other kind of setups, we can as well do all that. Maybe change the service name or change anything else. All that configuration can be done via the updates. It's not far-fetched from what you've seen us doing using the updates for this particular session, so I'm not going to go through that for time's sake. Anyways, this is where we're going to call a shot. We can see how it is for us to, if I could go back to my slide, if it loads rapidly, just use the ECS to launch and get something all up there running. Now the next thing I'm going to show is to maybe use ECS to manage application at scale, more like you want to scale an application, how you can as well use the ECS to do that, under which we'll be covering maybe deploy any cookie application using the Amazon ECS, create the Amazon ECS auto scaling group, capacity provider. Then also we'll be working with ECS manage scaling, as well as looking at adding loads to test and observe the scaling the way it's been implemented. So that will be all for working with Amazon ECS Container Service. I hope you love the content. Please, if you do, like, and do not forget to subscribe and turn on the notification button. And I'll see you in the next recording. Have a good day. Bye.